Now, the day before the governor flew the Venezuelans to Martha's Vineyard, the Anti-Defamation League released this report, Hate in the Sunshine State, documenting the rise of white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups in Florida over the last 2 years. In reading the report, one thing that was clear to me is that when elected officials, through their words or actions, demonize a group of people, for instance, immigrants, as a danger or threat to our community, it emboldens these racist groups to push their hate even further. Before DeSantis' secret flights to Martha's Vineyard were uncovered, I spoke to Ben Popp, an investigative researcher with the ADL, and Sarah Emmons, the ADL's Florida Regional Director.
So this report published by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, titled Hate in the Sunshine State, finds that extremism is on the rise here in our great state of Florida. One of the key findings from the report is that we saw a 71% increase in extremist-related incidents from 2020 to 2021. And as we are more than halfway into 2022, we're seeing a continuation of this extremist activity, which we're finding very concerning.
So when we talk about those, the rise in those extremist-related incidents, a large number of those can be attributed to one specific network in the state of Florida. There's this developing white supremacist network that we've been monitoring for some time, and it's largely centered around a couple of groups, one called the Goyim Defense League, GDL, and another called White Lives Matter. And so these groups are collaborating and working together in an unprecedented way to distribute propaganda and hold in-person demonstrations across the state.
Ben, let me stay with you for a second. Is it primarily that they're making their presence known? Are they, by picketing, protesting, doing things along that line, which, we all understand they have a constitutional right to do? Or is it more concerning than that?
Yeah, so I think on the surface, propaganda distribution and these in-person rallies that they're holding, dropping banners from overpasses and stuff like that, can seem a little bit less harmful than it actually is, because the goal of these groups is to normalize their ideology and to further desensitize the community to this messaging and this horrible imagery that they're using. So the idea is to slowly continue to make the community aware of their presence, as well as to, as I said, normalize their views.
Sarah, pick up on that point. What's the harm here?
So part of the work we do here on the ADL Florida team is actually talking to the people who receive this propaganda in their driveways. We've seen on the news about these anti-Semitic pamphlets being distributed in little baggies with corn or rice. Things like that are incredibly harmful and intimidating for communities. And that really, as Ben spoke to, is the goal of these extremist groups, is to scare people, to intimidate communities, and to normalize this kind of rhetoric in a way that I think is really terrible for the communities we live in.
But it seems as if the numbers, I think what you cite is, you talk about dozens of people. Now, one person holding these views is disturbing, dozens is certainly as troubling, but in a state of the size of Florida, is it really that troubling when you've got dozens of people holding these sorts of views? I'm not supporting it. I'm just trying to get a perspective on how serious this is.
Yeah, so that's one positive that you can take away from the report is that these events are not attended by massive numbers of people. It's usually in the tens of people, the tens or hundreds of people on occasion. But specifically with this white supremacist network that we're discussing, they're generally quite small. But what they're doing is building a growing community across Florida of white supremacist groups that are working together. And, while one of these events hosted by one of these groups may have 20 people at it, what they're doing is working with other groups that may have 20 people that continuously attend their events, and they're expanding that way.
So I understand that numbers aren't everything. It's the normalization of these views that I believe you find so most troubling. Sarah, let me ask you, why do you think these incidents are rising? What's your theory as to why this is spreading more so in the last few years than we've seen in the past?
You know, it's really hard to pinpoint any one cause as to why we're seeing a rise in extremist related incidents. But, you know, our Center on Extremism and our work here in Florida, we think about a couple contributing factors. So certainly one is just the widespread disinformation that we see circulating not only online, but in newspapers from our community and our elected leaders. We're also seeing a rise in conspiracy theories, individuals who are perpetuating conspiracy theories, which we know theories like the Great Replacement theory have even led to violence that we've seen throughout our country, even in this past year. And then the third that Ben spoke to a bit is just the normalization of hateful rhetoric. We're seeing, you know, here in the state of Florida, we see our elected leaders using very hateful and divisive rhetoric in a way that I don't think is beneficial to anyone and helps embolden these extremists to commit these hateful acts.
Well, let's stay with that for a second, Sarah. In going through the recommendations from the report, one of the things that you say, and it's amazing to me that it even needs to be said, is that elected officials and community leaders must strongly and consistently condemn anti-Semitism and extremism wherever and whenever it occurs. The fact that you have to recommend that is telling to me. Are you under the belief right now that enough of that is not being done?
Yes. I think there are many acts that we've seen across our state over the past few years and nationwide where hateful acts are occurring. We're seeing individuals in very hateful moments where we're not seeing all of our elected and community leaders condemn and call out this behavior. And that, again, that emboldens these extremists, that they're taking these actions and that they're not hearing from our community leadership that that's not acceptable. It encourages them to do it the next time and the next time.
The report, the recommendations write, officials and community leaders must denounce hate, especially when it emanates from a group or political party that they identify with. I guess I want to try to take it from the abstract to the reality of what we're dealing with. We've seen an increase of rhetoric. In the report, they cite, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the January 6th event. Do you specifically believe that Republicans should be doing more? I mean, one of the photos that is most striking to me in your report is a group of Nazi-like sympathizers holding up a sign, DeSantis country. Now I understand that they're not doing that with DeSantis's blessing, but where's the condemnation? Is that your point?
Yes, and, at the ADL, we see anti-Semitism and hateful rhetoric coming from the left and from the right. And when we speak to people of any political party calling it out, if you lean left or you lean right, you have to condemn that hatred, even if it comes from your own political party or from people that you might otherwise agree with. I think it's on each and every one of us to call out that rhetoric wherever we see it. And that's the work we do here at the ADL.
I'm just going to ask the question, are you disappointed with what you're hearing from the governor in Florida on this issue?
I think there is many layers of disappointment when we look at many of our leaders, both statewide and nationwide. I think there's certainly more that can be said and more that can be done across our leadership.
When we come back, we talk to Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava about her plans to offer millions of dollars in rental assistance and mortgage relief to struggling residents. Stay with us.